What do healthy snacks, AI-powered routing, and just picking up the phone have in common? Turns out they're all part of what's working in driver retention right now. Let's take a look at what the Best Fleets to Drive For program is telling us. This is Deborah Lockridge, and I'm talking to Jane Jazrawy about the trucking companies that treat drivers right. She's the CEO of CarriersEdge, which provides online training tools for trucking and created and runs the Best Fleets to Drive For program. Welcome to HDT Talks Trucking, Jane.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
I know there's quite an involved process in choosing the best fleets to drive for, but for those who might not be familiar with the program, can you just give us kind of a quick high-level overview of what it's all about?
What happens? Well, it's basically a survey of the best workplaces in the trucking industry in Canada and the United States. And what happens, there's like four basic stages. So we start every year's program. So the next one to start will be September for the 2027 program. And it starts with a driver nomination. Drivers nominate the fleets that they think are really good workplaces, and that you only need one nomination. And what we do is then we invite the carrier or the fleet to participate. It's open to for-hire carriers in Canada and the United States. You need to have your own authority and basically have at least 10 tractor trailers. And that's pretty much all you need. So we have pretty small carriers, we have larger carriers, like we have all ranges of size. It doesn't really matter what size you are. So you get nominated, you're invited to participate, and then the carrier participates and does a questionnaire, a pretty comprehensive questionnaire, and then we do a carrier interview, and then we also do driver surveys. So it kind of goes nomination, interview, question and interview, surveys, and then we take all of that information and we compile the scores. And so it's very objective, like we don't have any, everything is score based. So we basically add up the scores from the questionnaire, the driver survey, a little bit of safety and retention numbers in the mix there, and then we come up with a top 20 at the end, the top 20 best fleets to drive for. And we also have a Hall of Fame, which are the carriers that have been in the program for so long that we kind of have to kick them out of the regular top
Like they
20.
keep winning and nobody else gets a chance.
Yeah, exactly, because once you have figured out how to create a really good workplace, you've already created the programs, and basically all you're doing is you're just keeping them going and updating them. And so if you keep on with the Best Fleets program, you're going to be in there for years or decades. Like we have the longest running fleet. I think this year won the best overall for the Hall of Fame overall award was FTC Transportation, and they've been in the program for 14 years.
And they're small, right? They got like 25 trucks.
Pardon me?
They're pretty small, right? They've got like 25 trucks or something.
They do. They have 25 is kind of their maximum, and they've always had sort of between 23 and 25. And yeah, they are, but they don't sort of sit on their coattails. They don't rest on their laurels. They're like, every year, and this is very helpful when you're in the Best Fleets program, is you try and figure out what programs aren't working for us anymore? How do we improve this? How do we change it so it's not boring? And like people get bored of the same program over and over again. So they, changing and like constant improvement is really important in the program, and definitely FTC has been doing that. They were the overall winner back in 2016, so this is nice to have their 10th year anniversary of that, and they won it again.
You've been doing this for quite a while, so you've got kind of a great perspective to keep track of trends in driver recruiting and retention. What are some of the things that you've seen this past year as you evaluated the fleets that were nominated?
So that's an interesting question. What we notice is that when when freight is down and when things are tough in trucking, carriers, we have lower participation from carriers because they're trying to keep the lights on sometimes, and we saw a lot of carriers go under this year or have a lot of financial difficulties. They're not going to be participating in this because this is where, carriers often, when they're struggling, they're not thinking about drivers and driver programs and how to make drivers happy. They're trying to get enough miles to keep their trucks profitable. So we do see that participation goes down, and it actually went down from the drivers as well. So everybody has been in this kind of slump. And for this year, there's a couple of interesting things. One was that drivers seem to be about as happy as they usually are. So we have a driver survey question where it's the question is, are you happy at your carrier? What is the level of your happiness? And everybody is pretty much the same. The general satisfaction with the carrier is about the same. But what we really noticed is so many things have just gone down. So driver satisfaction pretty much with everything has gone down. They they don't trust the fleets as much. They don't trust has gone down. The feeling of that the carrier has been honest with the driver has gone down a significant amount. We generally find that with driver surveys, most of the time the people that the drivers that are completing the driver survey are happy. People who are not happy tend not to complete the survey at all because they've just checked out. So we have a lot of high satisfaction, but what I saw was that the level of dissatisfaction was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was actually started 2 years ago that the satisfaction was going down. And now, you can really see the jump.
Which makes sense. If you just look at, the freight recession and the struggles that the industry's been going through these past 2-3 years.
Oh, absolutely.
Any particular things that people were doing, that fleets were doing, that you saw that maybe were stood out, that were innovative, or that were trying to combat the situation, do well with it, even though they were struggling with the freight recession?
What I find is that it's not so much about how replacing a program with a program is about the general how you communicate. And the people who had the highest satisfaction and are also on the top 20 and generally, winning overall awards, they were not they were still cutting programs. They were still dialing it back, but they talked to their drivers. And they didn't I would say that the innovation is not relying on surveys. It is actually talking to drivers, calling them, having that, talking to them when they're in the office, talking to them about what is actually happening. This is I think it's really important to not think about communication with drivers as how we can do it easily, because it's hard. To communicate effectively, just with you and me, it's, if we were talking to each other every day, we would probably have ups and downs, right? And communication is really good when you can recognize the downs and kind of bring them back up. And what's happening on the fleet level is there's so many tools that will kind of send messages to drivers over and over again. It's really easy to send messages to drivers, but it's harder to get feedback from drivers. So people were relying on surveys, and there is an incredible amount of survey burnout, total burnout. People do not want to do another survey. So just, keep that in mind. I know we do a survey, but one of the quotes from the survey was, the best part of working here is not doing another survey. I mean, it was just they specifically said surveys. Wow. But they do want, like drivers do want to be in communication with their fleets. They want to talk to someone. They want to talk to someone about what is happening with the company. They want to know what's being done. So one of the overall winners, not the overall winner this year, but K&J has been an overall winner, I think, 3 times. And K&J is a small fleet out of Sioux Falls. So they were talking about how they really had to talk to their drivers about the changes and about they're an owner-operator company, so they're, finding freight for them and being able to let them know what's happening. The president does a video, like a short video that's really popular with the drivers because it's really state of the business. So that kind of communication is really what I found. That is the more innovative thing than technology, because the technology is tending to put a barrier between the driver and the office. So when you're putting up all those barriers, it's actually innovative to go back to how you communicate with a real person, like 2 real people talking together.
Yeah, and I think, in hard times, especially with any company, not just trucking companies, having a transparency of this is what's going on, this is why we may have to cut back this program or, whatever, but to understand why this is happening and have that transparency and communication, I'm sure goes a long way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There are some things that I did see as well that were that I think are going to be really good for tech innovation. One of the more negative things that we've seen, like for all time, people hate routing. Like they're always saying that routing is somehow unfair. Everybody thinks that. They think that it's like there's favoritism, there's, I don't know, or someone just takes a dislike you, or you say the wrong thing to the dispatcher and you get it on a bad route and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's really hard to tell about how much of that is real, because we do ask about it, and the fleets say that they try to be as fair as possible, but the drivers always have a negative outlook on it. But one of our other best fleets, Leonard's Transportation, they have started to use AI for planning and routing. And what they're finding is that, and they've also been talking to their drivers about it, and they've tested it and things like that. And they're finding that the level of satisfaction with routing is actually going higher, which is probably some of the best use case of AI. I know that AI is used in cameras all the time, and that's already that's not really novel anymore. That's,
Right.
Cameras, AI, figure out, who's doing what and who's, nearly hitting into whatever. But this whole thing for routing, I think, is really interesting because it does not replace communication from a person. It actually just takes out some of the negative things that people were kind of inflicting on the process, right? That favoritism, like a person is giving me this route because, well, now it's not that. It's the driver gives the preferences of like how they want to be routed. So when they want to come home, where they don't want to go, all of that stuff, the AI can figure it out better than human beings. And so it takes a lot of the subjectivity out of it. So I think it's a really interesting way to use AI.
Yeah, I mean, people can have totally subconscious, unconscious biases that, and
Yep.
and juggling all those different things about the driver's preferences along with whatever the efficiencies and stuff that the fleet needs to get out of it. That's a lot of different things to juggle. And that is one of the things that AI is real good at, is looking at all that and pulling it together far more quickly than a person can.
Yeah, not trying to do things like communicate with drivers with AI.
And maybe give the people more time to communicate with the drivers, since they're not spending as much time trying to figure out the routes.
Absolutely.
Are any differences you see? I know you've got a small fleet and large fleet category. Are there any differences you tend to see between small fleets and large fleets?
The biggest difference is the complaining. So it's the small fleets think that they can't do what the big fleets do, and the big fleets think that it's harder to be personal, like to have a personal relationship with drivers. So, we get it from both ends. Oh, and it's not so much people who are in the program, it's people who aren't in the program, and you ask them why, and they say that. It's too hard to win because I'm a fill in the blank fleet. It won't work. And, we don't really look at it that way. What we look at is, what are you doing with the resources that you have? So all of the things that I've just talked about, like talk to drivers, that's a phone call. And it's really the expense, I guess, or the money that you have to spend is about organizing how you're going to make calls and maybe, your phone lines or whatever. But it's a pretty cheap, small fleets can do it, large fleets can do it. It's really how you execute. And you can have technology as a small fleet. Technology's come down in a lot of cases. And you have technology as a large fleet, but what happens in the large fleets is that the organization is just really bad. Or in the small fleets, you have the reluctance to adopt technology. So I think the biggest difference is really the types of problems that fleets have to solve. It's just different problems. You still have to solve problems, but it's really how are you getting to your drivers? And that's the basis of how are you getting to your drivers? How are you finding out what they need, and how are you communicating to them what you're going to deliver? It's the same thing. The problems you might just need different types of organization. So for example, in a small fleet, so FTC Transportation, who's the overall winner for the Hall of Fame, has 24 or 25 drivers right now. But they were using a spreadsheet system as so now you have all these scorecards and things like that. They're all automated. Well, the current vice president was doing that with Excel 10 years ago, and had the entire system in Excel, and was able to provide the same type of scorecard results as a bigger fleet who was doing it with a system, and probably better because she was getting information from her drivers about the scorecard, whereas a larger fleet would just throw out a scorecard and was like, there you go. And unless you bother to get feedback from the drivers about what's useful or not useful, then, the small fleet is going to do better than the large fleet.
You've got fleets that use both employee drivers and owner operators. Does being a best fleet to drive for differ? What does it take from the view of that employee versus that owner operator, like what they're looking for?
Yeah, the what do you like best is a driver survey question. It's kind of at the end, you score honesty. Do you get input into technology? Do you like your routes? Do you like all of that stuff? And so all the specific questions. And then at the end, you say, what do you like best? What would you like to see improved? And what do you like the best? And what do you like the best for owner operators? One of the number one things that they say is freedom. Like, they want to be able to run their businesses how they like. Pay is, it's almost secondary to freedom. But they both say family. Like they want to work for a place that recognizes them as a human being. They want to have that feeling, and they all say it feels like a family when they are enjoying the work. And what I usually say to fleets is, from the office side, you don't get to say the word family. It's not about, you can say that it feels like a family, but until your drivers say it feels like family, it doesn't count. You can say it until you're blue in the face, but I'm not going to believe you until your drivers verify it. But for owner-operators, it's they tend to really respond to the company kind of providing things for them for their business, which is something that, for a company driver, they want the support for them as so an EAP, mental health supports, if I get sick, is it going to be okay? When you are an owner-operator, working for an owner-operator company, it's more about, do I have access to discounts? Do I have access to whatever you have access to? What is it like getting the shop to do something for me? That's what they value. They want to not be forced into using the company's shops. They want to be able to, have the company do things like do inspections when they go into the yard, get them to do a vehicle inspection for them, things like that. That's what they want. They want things that are going to actively help them move their business forward. And that also goes with things like going back to K&J, who is a contractor fleet, and what because people love K&J. Like they have a huge driver satisfaction. And what the president does is she actually goes and makes sure that she has contacts so that she can take her contractors and basically say, so you need accounting support? Okay, here's someone who you can talk to. You need to buy another truck and you need, finance. Then, we have relationships with this bank. A long time ago, a large fleet did the same thing. And it's kind of interesting to see that the small fleet does the same thing as the large fleet, is that connection to, business support rather than, being able to go and get free meals and things like that. Although I will say, in both cases, healthy snacks at the terminal is number one.
Really? Healthy
for
snacks?
For both drivers and out of the kind of freebie stuff like, loaner car at the terminal or healthy snacks available, weight management programs, that kind of stuff is healthy snacks. So if anybody's listening and you don't provide healthy snacks to your drivers, they'll like it.
Well, there you go. There's that's easy. Well,
yeah,
something you could do, put in place.
Give them an apple.
Quickly.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Well, Jane, some great insights here. Anything else that comes to mind that we haven't gone over that you feel like other fleets ought to know about what you found from this year's program?
Okay. So this is going to be a little weird. Social media, the effectiveness of social media is on the decline. So
really,
when we were, 10 years ago, maybe a little longer, social media was kind of, it was pretty popular. It was not like it is now, but this is when, Twitter was kind of starting. Carriers didn't use Facebook very well, even though the drivers were all on there. Mm-hmm. The carriers weren't using it that much. And so what we started asking is, do you follow your company on social media? And there was, I would say around 2020, there was a peak where, about 70% of drivers were following their carrier on social media. It's down. It's way down. It's less than half now. So I think that what's happening, because social media has become so complex, that if you're relying on social media to get messages to your drivers, they may not even be on social media anymore. They may have just said, nah, forget it. I'm gonna maybe Discord or something, or FaceTiming my kids, but that's it. It's become a, you might have a lot of followers, but you're not so there's a difference in social media between recruiting and retention. With recruiting, you're trying to say, hey, look at us. We're a great company. Come and be interested. But a lot of fleets use it for retention as well. They use it for sending messages to drivers and positioning things. And that's not really working anymore. So if you still want to use it for recruiting, it's probably fine. But if you're using it as a communication tool, you may
I
not be
could see
reaching the
that. I mean,
drivers.
just in general, I mean, the algorithms and all that have made it virtually impossible sometimes to actually get, even if you are following somebody, to actually see what they're putting
What
out
they're
there.
saying.
So, it's kind of part of, I think, a larger trend in social media in general. Is there anything that's replaced that?
A little bit. There's been a little bit of like sort of texting apps. Like there are some apps that you can get that are basically just private chat. Nobody's using something like Signal or anything like that, but there's the talking private text chats. People have talked about group email or text chains and that kind of thing. I think there's a place for a better communications app that just is private, and I think trucking is looking for that. I don't think they've found it yet. So people are kind of experimenting with different things. And it's really too bad because Facebook was really worked well for a few years. You could have the private, and I would say that the private groups on Facebook. So if your company has created a private area for drivers, then that's still working. But if you're using public groups, it's not. And if you're going into TikTok and Instagram and that kind of stuff, you're still just blasting to people. You're not getting the information back. So
Creating that
it's
sense of
kind of
community that I
private
think,
Facebook groups and text apps.
yeah, I think at one point Facebook would give you the sense of community, and it doesn't anymore. And
No,
yeah,
it doesn't. It's just ads, really. I find that every time I'm on Facebook, and I kind of have to because we have a Facebook page, it's just ads. And sometimes they're good ads because they're directed right to me.
right. And sometimes you go, what? Go away.
But I mean, I follow the best fleets, and I don't see things from them unless I'm going straight to their page. So you're right; it's not that effective anymore.
It'll be interesting
But
to see
I think it's still open to what could replace it.
yeah, be interesting to see what kind of things might come up with as far as apps and whatnot to replace that. So
Discord for the young people, like for the young people. No, but I know for Gen Z, which I'm pretty sure that trucking is going to start talking about is, how do we get Gen Z? And because they figured out the millennials. Millennials are all there, the ones who are going to go. How do they want to communicate? And they don't. They're also not social. It's Discord. Discord's huge. So we'll see if that shows up next year. That'll be very interesting.
be interesting to see.
Yes.
All right, Jane. I think I'm about out of time, but thanks so much for talking to me today.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Great to talk to you.
That was Jane Jazrawy with CarriersEdge talking about the best fleets to drive for program and insights they've gotten. Thanks for listening to or watching HDT Talks Trucking, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.